this mission to me matters so much because I know how awful it feels to be in that pit. I know what it feels like to be the guy who thinks there's no way out, who has made all the mistakes, who's like tanked his own life because of your bad decisions. Men commit suicide 3 to 5 times higher than women. Over 70% of men do not have a single close friend that they can call and actually talk honestly like you and I are right now. As men actually used to talk to each other and actually used to solve their problems together. And then somewhere along the line, we thought that we didn't need to do that anymore. My story is just one of tens of hundreds of millions. And that's what we need to change, you know?
Welcome to the podcast, Flip the Switch. Today, I am here with a special individual, George Hayworth, who is the founder of Elite Sentinel Coaching. George is also one of the founding members of the Present Father podcast. Both of these are mission-oriented companies that complement George's background of both military, civilian life, and continued education and personal development into his character. And now he's leading men across the country and probably across the globe work and bond together to get to that next level and work through some of the biggest and tough challenges mentally, physically, spiritually, to implement into their own lives so they can take the lead. So George and I have had a couple of different conversations. He's becoming somewhat of a friend of mine, and so we decided to have him on the show. Wanted to be able to give him a platform to talk about how he went from a path of military, and then it's somewhere along the line he decided to flip the switch in his own life and bet on himself, and that changed the trajectory of his life, and now it's changing the trajectory of many other men's lives. So super pumped to have you on the show, George. Welcome.
Man, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and let's get to it.
Awesome. All right, so I guess one of the first questions I like to start is maybe give us a background of kind of who you are, right? What you do and how you got here.
Yeah, so I'm a husband and father, combat veteran. I still serve in the National Guard now, part-time. So background, kind of grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Most of my early childhood is pretty good, but by the time I was a teenager, I started really noticing that, you know, my parents weren't doing so good. And in a lot of reflection and a lot of the deep work, I've realized how dysfunctional my upbringing really was. Lots of arguing, super codependent, walked on eggshells everywhere. My parents divorced when I was 16, actually the week of my 16th birthday. So that was a joy. But you know, I was really physically small, and I never really felt very masculine growing up as a young man, you know, from boyhood to manhood. And so, you know, I had lots of insecurities, lots of fears. And so with everything that happened too, just in the family life, you know, I had a lot of my own dysfunctions, and I kind of walked into most situations in life as kind of just an angry, pissed off teenager trying to prove to everyone that he wasn't broken, you know, or that he was a man. And, you know, most people can sniff that out pretty quickly. So, you know, I look back on experiences in my life and it's like, oh man, you know, I wish I could take those back. But, you know, that's just like a very high level view of who I am and kind of how my upbringing was.
Nice. So stay there. So like 15, 16, that's a tough time. I mean, you lose your dad and you have, you know, trouble tapping into the alpha side, so to speak, right? And feeling comfortable in your body. What happened between 16 to 18? I mean, those are super influential years for you.
Yeah, so we can certainly spend plenty of time here. There's a lot to unpack, but yeah, so they split up, and I don't know how this came to be, but we had like very limited visitation with my dad. It was like 2 hours a week or something like that. It was ridiculous because there was no violence. There was no, I mean, like, you know, I know much worse men who get to see their kids 50% of the time today, you know, who have done a lot worse things than my dad ever did. So I don't know how that came to be. And then there was tons of manipulation. So I was led to believe, you know, it was all my dad's fault and all this kind of stuff. So I was really angry at him. You know, he's done all this to us, and a lot of misplaced anger. And so our relationship was basically non-existent. You know, it was like, hi, good to see you. How's your sports thing going? Oh, it's going great, you know. So at a time in my life when you should have close connection with your father to really kind of put the finishing touches on you becoming a young man, I had none of it, right? I was basically raised by women. And not only that, I was also pissed off at my dad, and come to find out most of it was pretty unjust, actually. So that really,
Meaning you were hearing
yeah,
things that weren't necessarily true or taken out of context.
yes, yeah, all of it.
Yeah,
So
from the women's side of the family
yeah,
and painting your dad as
yeah,
the bad guy.
the gossip train and everything,
Yeah,
and this leads me kind of the next thing. So my mother would tell me more than I should know.
yeah,
You're older than the other kids. You're more mature, right? And so kind of felt good initially, right? He's like, oh, well, I must be, capable. But really, what's happening there is it's subverting your boundaries. And so as a young child, you're still a child when you're 16. You're not an
yeah.
adult. Your parent is basically stripping you of boundaries because you are becoming their emotional medicator.
Cushion, yeah.
And so I'm hesitant to say the term because it loves to get banned by YouTube and stuff, but it's emotional incest is the clinical term for it, or covert incest. And there's lots of books that talk about this. One that I read that was very helpful for me was called Silently Seduced. And then there's another one called Healing the Wounded Heart. And there's a whole chapter on just this in that book. But what happens to your brain and the way that you develop coping mechanisms is very similar to what happens to people who have had, violent physical sexual abuse. And I'm not equating
Same
the
type
two
of impact.
experiences, but what the brain responds to is almost identical. At least that's what they've found over research and stuff. So
Yeah,
my perception of healthy relationships and boundaries was really distorted. And not only that, when stuff like that happens to you, you kind of get crippled emotionally at whatever age you were, right? So as I grew up into a young
yeah,
man and getting into the military and then later the workforce and starting my own family, all this kind of stuff, I solved every problem like an angry, scared 16-year-old would do. And clearly that's not going to produce very good results for you. So
yeah.
that is a lot to unpack. I don't know how much time you want to spend on this subject.
No, that's good,
It
man. I
really
think it's
messed me up,
important
and those
because
insecurities just amplified to the max.
yeah, I wanted to stay there because I think a lot of men, as we grow older, we're always battling our inner child.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's at 7 to 10, it's
Mm-hmm.
16. There's always a period where we kind of get stuck and we don't emotionally grow from that experience. So I know that I read your story and your bio, so I knew that there was a little bit of context that I wanted the audience to
Yeah.
have around. Now you're 18, right? And you've got the responsibility as the older child. You don't have clarity from your dad,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're lost. And I think there's a great amount of men that watch the show and are out there that can relate to that,
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
right?
most guys may have slightly different scenarios, but that
Totally.
wound, that gap is all too common. And that's what I realized. Like, man, my story is just one of tens of hundreds of millions.
That's right.
And that's
Yeah.
what we need to change.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
it,
agree. It's
left me
like,
feeling very. I sought validation, so how hot my girlfriend was, that mattered, and like that defined who I was. And then, if we
yep.
broke up, now my identity's gone. And, so I started placing all my validation in outward things, right?
Other
Trying to
people.
prove how
Yeah.
manly I was because deep down, I just felt like a scared, tiny little kid. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's
it
tough.
leads to very unhealthy behaviors.
So then, well, I guess that's probably, I don't know if you came from people in your family, but let's talk about like what inspired you to pursue that career in the military.
So I always was drawn to the military. I always wanted, very idealistic. I wanted to do something great and bigger than me and, be a part of something bigger than myself and serve the country. So that was definitely a huge motivator for me. But in a lot of like reflection and, having done tons of therapy and lots of the deep work on myself over the last couple decades, if I really dissect why I was really drawn to that was, I think, for that validation, right? George needed to prove that George was a warrior, that George was masculine, that George had arrived and he made it, right? And
Yep.
so I had a lot of really good reasons for joining the military, but I also treated it so that my whole identity became wrapped up in it then, right? Because this is the only thing that's making me a man now. It's the only thing
Yeah.
that's getting me away from my past. And at the time, too, I didn't really have much awareness of like how dysfunctional my upbringing was. And it wasn't until I started making tons of bad decisions later in life that I realized, like, whoa, maybe there's some stuff buried down there I need to start ripping out and figuring out what's going on here. So, yeah, that to be perfectly, transparent, that was a huge motivator for me, is I wanted to prove that I could, lead men into battle and be one of them, and
Yeah.
I think at the surface level, that's a good natural thing for young men to want to do something great like that. But for me, it
Yep.
was it was essentially a medicator. It was like trying to get my fix to heal this wound that it was never going to solve, you know?
Yeah. So the George that went into the military, right? Were you 18? Was this no college? You went
No,
right
so I
into it?
did go to college. I did ROTC. So I got a scholarship in high school for
Nice.
4-year scholarship to do ROTC. I honestly did not know much about what that meant versus enlisting. I just knew I wanted to be in the Army and blow shit up and, you know,
Yeah.
do hua things, right? And so I thought ROTC
Yep.
was going to be like, you know, a lot of Army stuff. I was massively disappointed when I showed up and I'm like, when do we shoot? And they're like, once a year. And I was like, what do you mean once a year? I shoot more now as a
Really?
civilian, you know? Yeah. So you really play Army, you know? You learn some basics
Yeah.
and that's about it. So I did that for 4 years. Graduated, earned my commission as a second lieutenant. I got assigned to the field artillery, which was also a disappointment. I wanted to be infantry. But in hindsight, I wouldn't change a thing. I loved the route I had and the opportunities I got.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did the 4-year thing through school. You become an officer, and then you go to more school to learn how to do your Army job now. And so that's
Okay.
what I did. And then I was assigned to the 101st Airborne when I was 23 or 22, one of those ages. I can't remember. It's been a while now, but 2012 is when I got to the 101st, and pretty much right away we deployed. So showed up, had to learn quick, and got thrown right into it.
Right into combat.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Yeah. And so now this George goes into combat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did that foundation of the military influence your approach to you and maybe your approach to leadership? Like the George that started and then the George that kind of came out, what happened in that? Like, where did you grow or not grow?
Oh, I grew a ton. So I was extremely fortunate, right? I deployed on what was called an advisory team. And so it was very rank heavy. Like typically, you know, a lieutenant, if you're in charge of a platoon, you have like 30 soldiers that work under you, right? So I was just one of 14 guys. Most people were sergeants, staff sergeant, you know, sergeant first class. There were 2 junior enlisted, a couple lieutenants, a captain, and a major, right? So lots of rank on a very small team. Typically, there's not that concentration of rank in a team structure for the regular Army. And so because of that, I got to do like a little bit of everything. I got to do soldier stuff. I got to do officer things. I got to lead patrols. I got to be a gunner, you know, on the machine gun in the trucks. And I got to do all these different things that most young officers never get to do. And for me, because I got to spend so much time with these men, most of these guys I deployed with had deployed 3 or 4 times already in 2012, you know, like full length, 12 to 15 month deployments. So there was a boatload of experience. And I just soaked everything in, right? I'm sure they're going to see this and comment on it one day and laugh at me. But I was very green, very immature, but they taught me a lot. Like I learned a lot about not just Army stuff, but like how to be a man, you know? And so it was a very positive experience for me. And I also just want to be very clear, like the amount of combat I saw was very minimal. Like I work with people and know people who have experienced significantly more than I did. So I don't want to represent myself as some like Billy Badass who went and, you know, won the war single-handedly. That's definitely not the case. But it was a very positive experience for me. And so when I came home, I felt like I was a man now. You know, I thought I had made it. And then I married the girl. You know, we started dating before I deployed. We stayed together through the deployment and married her. And then we had this fancy wedding. And I was like, man, I'm living the dream. You know, like I made it. I beat the odds. I've got the beautiful girl. I've got the career I want. I'm a combat veteran now, you know, and I thought my life was just like set up for success and it would never stop, right? And that lasted about a year and the bubble popped.
Hey, what happened?
Yeah, so my Army job changed to one I didn't like as much. It was just very administrative heavy and lots of problems to deal with. We decided it'd be a good time to start our family, so we did. And we were super excited for all that, looking forward to it. And then with the birth, it was very brutal. I think my wife was in labor for like 72 hours. It was insane. It was like forever. Wow. So that obviously left her very drained and very, you know, depleted. She had severe postpartum. I was totally caught off guard with it. You know, again, handled things like a scared teenager as opposed to like
Yeah.
a man taking care of his family. And so our life kind of got turned upside down pretty quick. And then I started making lots of bad decisions, right? And just to, again, very transparent here, this is like a big problem with men and it's a big problem in the military, is like addiction to pornography.
Yeah.
So, I was looking at porn all the time, and that led to me like talking to women online and like just doing all kinds of shiesty stuff that I did not even agree with. Like my own personal code didn't adhere to these things, and here I am doing them, and I'm like, well, now I got to double down. I got to lie about it because I can't let her know, and it's just, I just started going on this spiral. And so that all it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so I was like, well, I can't stay in the Army now. I mean, our lives are completely unmanageable. So yeah, I started that process to leave active duty. And I thought that would kind of give us a breath of fresh air to start a new career. I'll make more money now and clearly won't be gone as much as I was in the Army and all that kind of stuff. And so it seemed like it would be a good move. And it didn't really help much, because all the root causes, most of them
We're still inside.
hadn't been dealt with, And so I was, again, trying to just solve it with all these external things and wasn't actually changing George inside and dealing with my inner child. And so to where it really got the worst was we moved to Texas. I started the new career and all that kind of stuff. I actually sent my wife back to Tennessee. We basically separated, and I was like, I'm done. I got a lawyer. Fully intended to get divorced. And then during this time, to make matters, worse, I went out and I broke our vows. I was unfaithful to my wife on multiple occasions. And so then I just woke up one day being like, who the heck am I?
Yeah.
What have I done, And it was basically just like point of no return. Like, man, I've seriously like messed things up. Like, and if I don't do something now, like it's only gonna just continue down, and I'll never get out of this,
Yeah, it's a trap.
So yeah, that's really where the bubble popped. Was 2016 time frame there, 16 to 17.
Okay. 8 years ago.
Yeah, and the fairy tale was gone real fast, and most of it, and this is where like my coaching stuff comes into play, is like, I know what it feels like to be that guy. I know what it feels like to be the guy who thinks there's no way out, who has made all the mistakes, who's like tanked his own life because of your bad decisions. And like, when I look back on all this stuff, George is really the one to blame, like, could my wife have done this differently, or could that or that? Sure, we can play the what if game all day. But in reality, if I would have owned my stuff, got help for my stuff, had some guys around me to actually hold me accountable before I started making all these bad decisions,
totally different game.
We never would have got to any of these situations in the first place, right? My leadership would have prevented these outcomes, but instead, because I didn't step into the role and cowered from them and was selfish, I almost destroyed everything that mattered to me.
Wow, that's thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah,
that's deep. So now you're running like two lives.
Yeah.
You don't even really agree with the one, and it happens so quickly. I know so many men that whatever, it's a vice or another relationship or pornography or online, like, it's just like, I don't even know how I got into this, but now I'm in it and I can't get out of it, and it sucks. It's a trap. But I think you're not alone there, and that experience, at some reason, has prepared you to help other people, I guess. So how do you get out of that?
Yeah.
Not
like easily.
You call your wife and say, hey, let me just lay this on the table. Do you run from it and just, point the finger and make it seem like she was the reason? Like, where do you go from there? Because those are some of the options. Yeah,
so I'm trying to get all the details right. I had been working with my counselor, and
you started going to therapy?
Yeah. So we'd been going to marriage counseling basically from the beginning. So my therapist knew like our stories and our backstories and stuff. And when things started initially getting bad, we went to this place called On-Site Together. And it's here in Tennessee, and it's like experiential therapy, and you do it like in a group.
Okay.
And so it was us and a bunch of other couples, right? And you're just in a room together like all day long doing all these different experiential things. But that was kind of like my first awakening to like, whoa, okay, my life, my upbringing was maybe not as rosy as I thought it was, because they did a ton of work on like your family of origin stuff. Because for most of us, that's where a lot of our dysfunctions come from.
Yeah.
So we went to that, and it was kind of like a wake up call. But again, I hadn't really changed me yet. I hadn't really gotten honest with myself about what needed to die in me so that I could become the man I needed to be and that my wife deserved, right?
Yeah.
So now I get to this point, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I tell my, I admit to my therapist, I'm like, I don't know how to come back from this. Like it's over, right? Like there's no way. And just through connections and everything, they got me back to on-site, actually. They did like a special veteran first responder thing. And so I went another week to on-site, and there was when in the group, I confessed to like other people what I had done. And this is what I want people to take away from this.
Is that the first time you shared it with anybody?
With anyone other than my therapist, right? No one knew but me and my therapist. And I was not going to tell anyone. Like I was like, I can't tell these people. And here's the story that played in my head my whole life was, if they only knew the real me, they would reject me. Or if they only knew the real me, they would judge me, or they would shun me, or whatever, right? And I carried that weight with me my whole life. So I was wearing all these masks for all these different situations, trying to be the right guy. But I wasn't really the right guy. I was just wearing a mask. And when you're carrying around a sack full of these masks, it's a heavy, heavy weight, right? And so I'd been doing that my whole life. And so at on-site, I'm with all these other people, and they're starting to share their intense stories and mistakes and things like that. And I was like, okay, I have no choice. I need to put this out there. And so I did, and I was terrified. I was like, these people are going to think I'm such a turd, like they're going to think I'm such a horrible man. And it was actually the opposite. There was like grace and understanding, and it was a very healing moment for me to realize like, okay, you have to drop the act. You can't keep pretending to be what you're not, And so like a lot of weight came off me in that moment.
That's tough.
And so then after going for the week, I met with my therapist too, because she was there as like one of the facilitators. And we had like a follow-up session to like, okay, here's the plan of action. And so she walked me through, you have to take your marriage and hold it in an open hand and hope that your spouse wants to continue to work on it. And that's the only way to start the healing process. And that is terrifying, because it's like, oh man, because you want to grip it as hard as you can, right? Because it matters to you, and you don't want it to fail, and you don't want to lose them. And that's the hardest conversation I've ever had in my life, was admitting to my wife, because you have to admit everything, right? Like that you did this, and that you want to work it out, and that you own it, and you're not going to make excuses for it, and that you're asking for for them to give you a chance, right? And that was rough. I would rather get shot at than do that again. So I mean,
I would probably be with you on that, because that's a really tough conversation to have with somebody you love.
But my wife,
how did she receive it, man?
Yeah, I mean, as you'd expect, she was extremely hurt, right? It's the ultimate betrayal. There's for a man, it's the worst thing you can do to your wife. Pretty much. It's literally the most betraying thing we could do, and I did that, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life, So she was very hurt, but she said pretty quickly that she didn't want to get divorced, and that she wanted to try and find a way to seek restoration.
Wow.
And so
she had grace.
Yeah, she is incredible, and that's one of the other things too, that I know you're a believer in like, you talk about the aspects of God, and especially grace being one of them. And like, as horrible as it is, the things that I did to get to this point, even in that broken, horrible situation, I now have the clearest picture of what God's grace really is, because no logical person would give me another chance, right? Like, she has every reason to leave, to say, nah, dude, like, you burned that bridge, and I did. Absolutely, I did. But I think God worked through her to soften her heart, and I now have this incredible gift of grace. And so after we've healed, we fast forward to today, we've been married over 10 years now, and our marriage is extremely strong now. We are like teenagers, high school sweethearts dating and all that kind of
Came
stuff,
out of it.
and there's a lightness and joyfulness to our relationship, in the big and the small things. And, I never thought that'd be possible again. I was like, for sure, there's no way that'll ever happen. But I get to have this extra lens now because of her forgiveness and her grace, that like there's this added beauty to what I have because I know what I almost lost, and it's hard to not get emotional about this because it means that much to me, and it's just such a gift that I didn't deserve,
Yeah, it's a beautiful gift, and it also, it's a gift from her, but it's a gift for you, because when you see that somebody else has the ability to forgive, like our wives do, like my wife has so much grace with me as well, it's like, I got to get some of that, I need to, even with myself, have grace with myself, because we're so hard on each other. That's tough, but it's so amazing that you guys stuck to the original commitment, right? For better or for worse. And I think that is so important in that part of the story, because like, we're not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes. They're all different types of mistakes: excessive drinking or drugging or womanizing or cheating or texting, or lying. But when you get to the core of who the human is and they put it on the table, I think that says a lot about the power of transparency, and then allowing a higher power to come in and work through you because you've put it on the table. And so that experience, I think, puts you in a really good position to lead other men, right? It's like you've been through combat in your marriage, and that's war, and that's muscle memory, and that's experience that other men can now learn from. So that leads to kind of, you come through it. Now you're maybe not fully healed, but you're a more well put together person from these experiences and these trials and tribulations. How does that set you up to then go and create your coaching company and lead other men? And where does that idea and mission come from? Like, what stage of your life, and then what sparked it? Like, what made you flip the switch to say, I'm going all in on this?
Yeah, man.
Right? Elite Sentinel coaching, and here's who we're going to be, and here's why we're going to do it.
Yeah. So I had to do a lot of work on me, right? I had a lot of growing up to do in a lot of ways. And so that process took a long time. Even 3-4 years ago, I was not even half the man I am today. Which I also want to be an encouragement to the men out there, that when you start down this path, it's not like it's a linear equation, right? Like, it's not like it's going to take 20 years. If you start really hitting it hard and getting some incremental changes, it will curve up. Like, your growth accelerates. Your ability to be better goes faster once you start really doing some of these basic disciplines that I'm sure we're about to talk about. But so for me, it took a while to get things going. There was a lot that I had to root out. And I also had to gain a lot of understanding about my wife's past too, because that's the thing, like, just from a relationship point of view, right? If you have troubled pasts, especially childhood type of traumas that were never really dealt with, you now show up, each of you, in marriage as the child version of you when you're having an argument.
Totally.
So angry 16-year-old George is yelling at scared little Whitney, who's like 7, How do you think that's going to play out? How do you think that builds trust and safety in a marriage? It doesn't, right? So not only did I have to work on me, I had to gain a lot of empathy and understanding for how my wife is feeling with my responses to anything. And that took me a lot of time, longer than I'd like to admit that it took me that long to like make those mental connections about like, oh, okay. But yeah, so that took years, a long time. And then come around like 22 is when we started the podcast, 2022. I had kind of gotten to a point where like, okay, I'm getting there now. Like, I feel like our marriage is
clarity,
doing a lot better. Yeah. Like, I'm not making excuses for myself anymore, and all that, right? So we started the podcast, and we started with just the intent of like, if we can just help one guy be a better dad, that will make an impact for that one family, and that matters, right? And so it was very humble beginnings. But what I didn't expect to happen was, by doing all these podcast episodes and talking to all these incredible people like yourself and everyone else I've talked to for the podcast, and the books I've read because they've recommended it to me on the podcast, I was like getting master classes on being a better man and husband and father every single week. And now here we are over 2 years into the process, and I'm like, okay, that has unlocked a lot for me, right? And then,
Yeah, talking through it
oh
and
yeah,
just
yeah.
working it and telling the
'Cause
story
if
and
you,
seeing it from a different angle.
yes. And if you have the
Super
humility to
powerful.
kind of like self-reflect and be like, okay, well, where does that apply to me? And that's hard
Yeah, yeah,
because you don't like to feel
yeah,
bad, like, ugh, that like that hit home. But if you have the
yeah,
humility to be like, okay, well, that hit home, how can I
yep,
change it? You know? And so I've
yeah.
just been consuming that for years now. And um, I also went through a program. I met him through the podcast called The Family Captain, where I realized, okay, I've leveled up a lot as a dad and like as a man, but I still have a ton of work to do as a husband, right? And his
Mm,
course was just a godsend for me, where I finally made all the connections where I still had excuses for myself, or well, she's doing that and blah blah blah. And I learned to lead for real, to really be a husband, and to stop
nice.
making excuses and to own all the outcomes and to have love and empathy even when it's not deserved, right? And um, that has just ignited things forward even more. So, very long-winded answer to say how I got to the coaching program. I then realized a little over a year ago, I had this like wake-up moment where for me, it was a very spiritual thing where I think this sentence formed in my head that this is not the path I have for you. I was
Hmm.
looking at myself in the
That's
mirror,
what you
getting ready
heard.
for work to go to this event, and I really think it was God saying, like, dude, you're supposed to be over there, and you're going over here. And
Mhm.
so I started reflecting and ruminating on that heavily, asking for advice from all my mentors and people I looked up to, like, hey, I'm thinking I could do this or this. Do you think I'm just being emotional about this, or I'm actually looking at it the right way? So I pressure tested myself, and I asked people to basically convince me not to start a coaching program. And every time I was doubting myself, another door opened, or another person came into my life that I had no business meeting, and had like the thing I needed to hear, or gave me the piece of advice I needed, and just the thing started going faster. And so I was like, okay, clearly this is bigger than me. Clearly I'm meant to take all of this pain and help other men not make the same
Leverage it.
mistakes. And so that's where it started, was that simple mission of like, I've learned the hard way. I can crunch it down into a very consumable, form for men to take
Yep.
it and just dominate with. And they don't have to
Mm,
go through all the crap I did. And
yeah.
sometimes we learn best from like our failures, but I think you can also avoid a lot of landmines. There's a lot of wisdom in doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where Elite Sentinel was born. And again, kind of humble beginnings, but this mission to me matters so much because I know how awful it feels to be in that pit. I mean, to
Yeah.
have those ideations and like
Sure do.
being like the Glock's in the other room, I could just go do everyone a favor. You know,
Yeah.
most men are in that place. Just
Yeah.
some quick stats on suicide. It is June Mental Health Awareness Month for men. 3 men commit suicide 3 to 5 times higher than women. Over 70% of men do not have a single close friend that they can call and actually talk honestly, like you and I are right now, sharing these types
Yeah.
of things. And we wonder why men are feeling completely stuck. It's because we're cut off. We're totally alone. And I was isolated. This entire process, all my mistakes I was making, it's because I intentionally cut everyone out who would actually hold me accountable, who would be like, hey, bro,
Yeah.
you're not going in the right direction. Oh, well, I'm not going to hang out with you anymore. I did it to
Yeah. We
myself.
don't hear it. We don't want to hear it.
Yeah. So it's some
You
serious
have.
stuff.
It is really serious stuff. There's so much there, and it brings sadness a little bit, right? Because what you said is so true. I talked to a guy yesterday, just a conversation with another leader, and he's super successful at one of the largest apparel companies out there, and I know him through LinkedIn, and we just made a connection, and we decided to jump on a call and have a conversation. It's supposed to be 15 minutes, but it was an hour and 15
Yeah.
minutes. This man told me everything about his wife and the betrayal and his kids and the responsibility. And I share all that because at the end he said, man, I can't tell you how nice it is just to have another conversation like this openly with another man. And I could feel the sigh that this man
Yeah.
had. Like he hadn't done this in
Yeah.
years, And it filled my cup, and it filled his cup. And it was like, I had the reflection of like, there were so many years where that was me. It
Hmm.
was like, I couldn't tell my wife I was going through this. I didn't want to tell her about the pressure of a business, or the lack of ability to communicate my feelings, or why I was so quick to be angry. Because like you said, it's like you don't want her to see the real person, and
Right.
she's going to think you're immature and you're a baby. And because that's how I acted when I didn't get my way,
Yeah.
because that was the toolbox that I had.
Yep.
And so what you've done, man, is like you've taken many, many years and I want people to appreciate this, the takeaway for me so far is like lots of years of failing forward, but then coming up for a solution, investing in that process, putting that skill into your belt, falling forward, recognizing, okay, I need to apply the same thing. I need to learn how to solve this and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Right? And most men stop when that thing, it's F this, you know, F her, F that,
Yep.
we're done. They turn to a bottle and they run, or they call it quits, right? Like I think that's what a lot of guys do.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of times where I've been like, F this, right? We just go there really quickly sometimes if you don't have the skills. But I've realized in my marriage, and I'm relating to your story a little bit, George, is like I also had to recognize the common denominator here is me.
Yeah.
It's not my wife. It's not my children. It's not the environment. It's not the guy that looked at my wife. The common denominator is me.
Yep.
And I'm either going to allow this behavior to be in our house and my kids to witness it and see the same things that I saw, or I'm going to figure out a way to get around people that can give me better skills, give me better ways of dealing with things.
Yeah.
And that is what now leads to you, right? It's like you have all these moments of trials and tribulations that most guys would fold the book on, but you kept seeking the information, you kept getting the counsel, you kept adding to your arsenal of information to prepare you for the life, for the marriage, for the business world. And that's super inspiring. Mm-hmm. So now all of that puts you in a position to create this company, Elite Sentinel,
Yep.
right? And the mission, I know, is to build leaders and forge legacies, right? That's kind of your power statement. Tell me how you take all of that and collapse time for people, because that's what you're doing. You're collapsing time, right, into a very like, hey, we have the muscle memory for what you're going through. We've been there. We have that playbook, and that is super valuable for the right people that want the solution. So tell us, like, what's an ideal person? Where are they in their life when they recognize, hey, this might be the group that I need?
So let me high level explain what the teaching is, and then we'll get to that question. There is, it's not just for married men, it's for men, period. Because unfortunately, like I said earlier, my story is all too common. Most men today weren't trained properly to be a real, authentic man. And if I can real quickly rattle through what I call the 4 pillars of authentic manhood, that'll help kind of frame up who needs this. So there's 4 pillars: king, warrior, mentor, and lover. Right? And most men are really good at 1 or 2 of the pillars. So at best, we're going through life as 50% of what a man should be, right? That's still a failing grade. So if you think of the kind of Greek structure, right, with like the Parthenon looking thing, 4 pillars holding up that roof, they have to be balanced. They have to be equally in your life to have the roof stay on, right? If one is missing, it's going to collapse. So real quick, men are built for leadership. It is a gift that we provide to others if we are doing it from a place of love and empathy and compassion, not being a tyrant. The warrior pillar is obviously in the physical sense. You should be physically fit. You should hone your body to be a weapon and defend those who need protection. But even more so in our current day and age, where are the real threats coming from? Most of them are not physical. They are social media, the internet, videos, movies, video games, the music your kids are listening to, the crap they're hearing at school. Most of the threats now to society in general are in the emotional kind of intangible state, right? Where are all the men? Where are all the men saying, no more of this? Like my parents' generation let this stuff just perpetuate.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. So that's the warrior pillar, right? It's not just defending in the physical sense. It's also defending ideals and beliefs that matter to us. And we should step into that, and men are built for that, again. And we're at our best when we are defending the innocent. So all of our power and strength is never to control others, it's to defend them. The mentor pillar is men have an affinity for learning new skills. It's fulfilling to us, right? We like to gain mastery over things. And we also have a good skill of paying it forward and training proteges and training other people to learn these skills and lessons and apply them in a day-to-day life. And so the reason this works so well is that before you can mentor someone, you have to master it yourself, right? Or gain mastery over it. So it ensures that you continue to grow and improve constantly. And if you think about, as I'm saying these, just think of men in your life who have embodied these attributes. You probably respect them pretty deeply. And the last one is it needs to be equal, but it's kind of a catalyst to all the other ones. It makes them all better. And that's the lover pillar. So beneath all of this, a man should have a fierce heart that beats for those he cares about. And it drives everything we do. And we often will know we love someone and we don't communicate it. And it's not just your family, right? It can be the people you work with. It can be people you're mentoring, any of that. Like, guys, how many friends do you have that you say, I love you, bro. I love you, man. Do you end your calls with, I love you? That should be normal. If it's not, you're the weird one, actually. But empathy, compassion, understanding, these are superpowers. And we think of these things as feminine, and they're not. They're human. Humans need to have empathy. You need to have understanding. If you want to be a badass king and leader, you need to have empathy. You need to understand where your people are.
I think,
so
100%.
Most men don't have this pillar present in their life. I was that guy. I was Mr. King and Warrior and nothing else, you know? Well, how does that guy come home? Not very fun to be around, right? So hopefully that defines kind of like who this is for.
It does.
The program is designed to teach you that first, authentic masculinity. We have to set you up for success, to give you the learning that you probably didn't get, like me. And then from there, we build upon a lot of the stuff I've learned through therapy, through the military. There's tons of leadership training for business, for leading your family, for leading yourself. There's a lot of things I've learned through all my different experiences that I basically can give you the cheat codes to the test, you know, in a very short time. I love the way you said compressing time. You don't have to go do everything I did to learn this stuff.
That's right.
And then, you know, we really hone in on like legacy and brotherhood too, because without a brotherhood, isolation is the #1 killer of men. And so you're going to get that through the program. But the guy this is most designed for is actually the guy who isn't married yet. I certainly will help the married men and can, because I understand you deeply. But when is the best time to learn this stuff? Before you get married. It's before you start a family and start making all the mistakes I made. So the best time is actually when you're younger, to be a true, authentic man, because it's not just going to benefit your ability to show up as a husband and father. You're going to kick ass more in work and business, in the marketplace, because you're showing up as a complete, capable man, not this scared teenager like I was. You know, you're going to have all the tools for all the situations.
And you'll attract a much better partner.
Absolutely.
You'll be in a position to attract the right type of partner.
I think we talked about this, right, is the importance of having a strong spouse. And that's one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make in your life. And if you're doing these things initially, that's a great point. You are the man that can earn that type of a woman, right? The woman who's going to love you and care for you and beautify your home and beautify your life and amplify the things in them, because that's what real women do. They amplify, right? Men, we can create the initial thing, and women tenfold it, you know? And in order to attract that type of woman, you have to be an authentic man. You have to do these things. And, you know, it's going to just set you up for success straight across. You know,
it will. I want to give an example there, like from my own life, because I relate to this so much. Before I met my wife, I was in a relationship for many years, and that relationship was hot and cold, right? We were very similar, so we were both spicy and very alike. So the reactions were very alike, right? So it was fiery. And I remember leaving that relationship and having this reset. And somewhere I sought God, and in that, I started designing what the next woman would look like, right? And what I didn't want to bring in from what I didn't want in a partner, and who I didn't want to bring into that relationship, right? Like, I don't want to bring this version of Dane into the relationship. So I had done this preparation of staying away from drinking and bars and womanizing and sex for a period of time. And in that preparation, I found my wife. And I'll share the story because I was of the belief that I had earned the right to be with this woman. And I felt that I was deserving of her. Where if I had met her 90 days ago, like, she would have gotten a fucking train wreck, and we would have never even gotten to the place of, like, let's
you wouldn't
date.
have loved yourself and wouldn't have been able to.
But also, George, the downside was I had that awareness, but as we got deeper into the relationship and I got more connected to her, then the scared little boy started coming up, because now it meant more. There was more on the line. And so then all of my insecurities didn't start playing out until we moved to another state together. I didn't have any friends around. It was just me and her. And now I started really just turning the wheels of insecurity.
Yeah.
And we spent 3 years going through, as I like to call, spiritual warfare in our marriage before our children, but we invested in it. We didn't run from it.
Yeah.
We did, like you and I, like, we're going to get help. We're not going to run. We're not going to call it quits. And I think that when you go through that with your spouse, because most people are so quick to just, it's over, we're done, let's cut it, get a new one. But nothing changes in the next relationship. Like, they literally just go into another relationship with the same
because you haven't changed anything about
qualities,
yourself.
weaknesses. Yeah, nothing. So I would say any guy that's watching this, you've been in a relationship before, it didn't work out for a reason. You've got to self-evaluate, like, who do I want to become for the next, woman in my life? And who do I need to get around that has those things? Because the most important thing is the 5 people you surround yourself with. And we know statistically, we're not going to bars and meeting cool dudes that are now part of our center of influence. We've got to find them online. We've got to seek people that have what we want or have gone through what we're going through, because that's the muscle memory and playbook that will serve you best.
Yeah.
And I think what yours is presenting for men is it's invaluable, right? Like, when you show up in a relationship for a woman the way you're supposed to, you stand out immediately, because today there's so many weak men. So you're setting men up for success for that. Like, you're building that pillar so that they can be the man for the woman and be the man for the child. And man, that's where you are building leaders who then go into forging legacies. So I'm tying in now kind of your work and your experience into, okay, now I can see why people would come and say, okay, help me.
Yeah, I mean, so I love to throw this acronym out. Most men today are salty, right? They're stressed, angry, lonely, tired, and they're yearning for a hell of a lot more. So I was that guy too.
Very
So
true.
I know how to give you all of the opposite of those things. I know how to make you feel powerful, confident, have more sex in your marriage, feel like you actually can lead in situations, have respect, feel confident about earning those things, as opposed to questioning every single situation, doubting yourself, being full of insecurities. And it's really not that hard. It just takes a little bit of pushing. And ultimately, I'm just the guide. I can show you the way, but you have to take the path. You have to make
You gotta do the work.
You have to put one foot in front of the other. But in 12 weeks, I can turn you from weakling to warrior. I can turn you from coward to king. And it's a process, and it's hard work. I challenge men heavily to really look inside themselves and start ripping out those things that need to be taken out, to really think about the future. And are you doing the things today that are going to give you that future? If not, you need to course correct immediately. And most of us don't have anyone around, to your point, right? Brotherhood is the superpower for men. We downplay how important it is to have masculine friendships, real strong, genuine friendships where you are talking about these kinds of things consistently. And just to drive the point home, it's not just because I'm a podcaster. Every conversation I have with any of my friends, or even somewhat of an acquaintance, we haven't known each other that long, I have these kinds of conversations every single day. 100%. Every single day. I have a conversation like this where I'm talking about real things with another guy, and that makes you better because you're thinking
that keeps George out of George's way.
100%.
Right?
But if you're stuck to left to your own devices, and the itty-bitty committee in your head is telling you how you're not enough and you're going to fail, and all your past and all your failures and blah, 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 how do you think you're going to show up in life? Like, how good do you think you're going to be? And here's the point, too, that I just don't understand how we got to this point. Where in life ever do we go into anything where we aren't trained to do it, where we don't have a coach, where we don't have a team around us to play the game? Nowhere. But somehow we think
nobody's
successful. Show up, get married, start a family, and crush it without any coaching or any help or any guidance whatsoever. I think what used to happen is men actually used to talk to each other and actually used to solve their problems together. And then somewhere along the line, we thought that we didn't need to do that anymore. And it's clearly not working. Vulnerable. Because look at the stats, just in any metric, mental health, or family staying together, drug abuse, all of it, it's getting worse. So clearly we need to make a shift. And this is where I come in a little strong on the guys here is, you were talking about finding a good wife and everything, right? Well, even after you're married, all the responsibility is still on you. You are responsible for everything that your family does or fails to do. So if you don't have the marriage you want, you're to blame. If you don't have the job you want, look in the mirror, bro. You don't have the things,
Yep.
you don't get enough sex. Well, you're probably not really being a great man for your wife. It sucks to swallow that pill.
It's
I
all
know I had
true.
to do the same
Dude,
thing.
I live that
It
as well.
blows.
So
It's not fun,
it's so true.
but it's fixable.
It,
It's
yeah.
surprisingly
And I
easy
think,
to actually make the shift. It's not
yeah,
as hard
one
as
of
you
them is
think it is.
the recognition of I'm the problem. And then two, I would probably say being vulnerable, right? Like you've
Yeah.
got to be able to put the guard down with
Yeah.
somebody.
So I like to
And
use courageous transparency because men are so scared of that word vulnerability. And that's really what
you
you're doing.
replace it.
You're courageously sharing the things that you need to share. And so here's the final point I want to make is I think as men, we've been convinced that we are not emotional. That is such a lie. You're a human being,
Yeah.
you have emotions. And the way you are emotional is different than women. And that's good, right? But it doesn't mean you don't have any of them. And the reason you're built that way is because you're designed to have connection. And not only that, men are actually designed to initiate connection. It's our job to pierce the armor, to pierce the situation, to close the distance, and create connections. The first most important ones we need, typically, is with other men. Because then you're going to get out of your own way. You're going to hear the things you need to hear. And sometimes we're so afraid of positive things. Like we convince ourselves that we didn't do a good job. You need that other guy to be like, no, bro, you did really good. Like,
Did a great job.
keep it up. That's great.
Yeah.
We're so hard on ourselves that we need that sometimes. It's not just you do better, right? So
Yeah.
brotherhood is a huge antidote to a lot of those problems. But the other thing
Yeah.
within relationships, oh, well, she's mad. I'm just going to like ignore it and hope that, she gets in a better mood. Oh, nice way to lead, man. That's real strong of you, right? You're actually designed to pierce through it. Hey, babe, you seem a little frustrated or scared right now. Can we talk about that? I'd like to understand. Yeah, it's all this and this. Okay, well, it sounds like you can play that out. You can get her out of that state through your leadership. And you're not manipulating her. You're helping her with these heavy feelings because she does feel it much more intensely than you do. And so that's where the man's role is to lead in even emotional things.
We've got to be curious about where our wives are and ask questions and listen. I think that's from my own marriage. Like I learned, don't overcomplicate it. Just ask questions and listen. Sometimes they don't even want the advice; they just want you to listen.
Almost always, that's what they want.
Yeah, where we're like, they'll tell me what to do. Like, just tell me what the problem is, what to do, and like, I don't need the solution. I just want to tell you what the problem is. Like, all right, well, that's okay too.
She wants to know that she can share things with you that are scary or hard, and that it's not going to set you off. Like, she needs you to be a pillar of strength for her. She needs her man.
That's right. Yeah.
And we so often withdraw from that, and so then she's left to deal with this heavy weight by herself. When she knows that there's a man in the house that isn't giving it to her, you wonder where resentment starts to build. She subconsciously, she knows this stuff.
Yeah, they do.
And I'm going to give guys, use this phrase. This is the one phrase to get it going in the right direction. Hey, babe, help me understand. Leave it there. Just ask that question over and over and over until she gets it out. And then say it back what she said. It's called mirroring. Okay, I heard you say this, this, and this. Did I get that all? Yes. Okay, and then validate it. You don't have to agree with it, but you can validate the feeling behind it. Okay, babe, I understand why that makes you feel so stressed. I'm sorry it feels that way, but I hear you. Do that
That's
first.
so good.
And just
My wife's a master at that.
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, I could do more of that, so I'll learn from that piece of it. Give me an example, George, of like somebody that came to you week one, day one, and like where they were, what were maybe the top 2 or 3 problems that they had, and how did they end up coming out the other end?
Yeah, so a lot of guys have so much self-doubt that they feel like to do some of these things, they're somehow being arrogant or, selfish, right?
Yeah.
This is a huge thing that I teach through the process is wanting to serve others better, to be a better man is not a selfish thing because you inherently make everyone's lives better that you serve, right? So there's a lot of that mindset shift, and you can kind of see the light bulb switch in guys about 5 weeks in where they're like, oh, and then they have a win in the real world, and they're like, I get it now, and so that happens a lot. The relationship stuff isn't, we don't go intense on relationship stuff. So if you're single, it's not like you're going to be missing out or whatever. These things, a lot of these tactics and skills apply to business and relationship. It's not unique, right? And
Yeah.
but the relationships inherently strengthen for everyone because they start showing up more like a man for their wife. You want to build attraction, be more of a man. And it's not
Yep.
as much as I love to be fit, that's like 1% of the equation when it comes to our wives or girlfriends, right?
Oh yeah.
Most of it
Yep.
is all of these other things. It's these subconscious things she's constantly seeing or not seeing. And when you start to do them, it really shifts the script for you, flips the switch. I love that name, the way we say that. But the other thing too is a lot of guys, they are in a position of leadership in work or they own a business, and they've
Yep.
never really learned how to deal with confrontation. And so this is something I'd leap headfirst into because leaders address confrontation immediately. Real leaders root out dysfunction everywhere they go. And you don't let a small problem get big. But we don't live in a world where confrontation is encouraged and it's seen as like this horrible thing. But to hold someone to account, if it's your business, that's your duty. Now, there are ways to do it that you don't crush them down, right? But you can correct a small thing before it becomes a problem. So that's a huge unlock that a lot of guys get too, is how to apply this stuff in business in a way that actually facilitates further connection and esprit de corps and camaraderie in the workplace, as opposed to being a tyrant yelling at people when they do the wrong thing. So a lot of that leadership training that Uncle Sam has spent millions of dollars on me to make me a leader, I pay that forward to guys and teach you how to do it at work,
That's great, man. So tell me, I guess, what are some of the goals and aspirations that you have for Elite Sentinel coaching?
Yeah, so I have a vision of this thing growing to a point where it's helping thousands or tens of thousands of men, because there's such a void right now. I mean, men are hurting heavily, and we feel like second-class citizens. We feel misunderstood, and it's frustrating, right? If you're married and you've got a family and you feel like you can't even lead in your own house, it's infuriating, right? It makes you angry and pissed off because you should be able to and you can't, right? So I want to give that gift back to men, like to restore them to where they don't feel this way all the time. That's my number one mission, is just to heal our society through men first, because the ripple effects extend over their families, their businesses. We just create more positive outcomes, right? That's mission number one. That's what I'm most worried about, helping as many men as I possibly can. And then being able to be a facilitator for other kinds of things like this to thrive and normalize it, right? My long-term vision is that I put myself out of business, because if men start teaching their sons to be this type of man and we actually model it and live it and don't need me anymore, then that is the actual goal. Because
that's a great goal. It's really thinking through it.
so hopefully I'm out of a job in a generation, right? But that's really the real vision here, is I want this to spread and have other men feel capable to actually start replicating this where they are. You don't have to run a whole coaching program, but men need to normalize getting together, elbow to elbow, knee to knee, looking at each other, having these types of hard conversations, and sometimes just being like, hey man, I'll just hold space for you. You matter to me.
Yeah.
We don't do that, right?
No.
And just a quick little snippet on that. I'm in a group, and one of the guys was sharing a very heavy thing, and he was apologizing for taking too much time sharing this stuff with us. And I interrupted him, and I was like, man, you matter to us. Like, this is why we're here, is for you when you're not doing good. And I told him a couple things like that, and he broke down in tears, and he said, no one's ever told me that in my entire life. Guys, we have to change
something so simple.
That shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't be 50 before someone tells you that.
I know.
That's insane. So that's the vision. I just want this to spark men doing that more often, because it will heal so many problems. And it's not about me.
I agree with you.
It's about our society. It's way bigger than me, and it'll never be about me. I'm just here. I have the skills, and I want to help men win.
Yeah, and lead them as a mentor, as a guide. What advice would you give, George, to someone who's currently struggling to balance kind of their professional ambitions with their role at home as either a spouse or a parent or, a girlfriend, with like taking that guy because most of us prioritize our profession and our career and that ambition, and we justify a lot of other bad behaviors because of that, right? Because that's the role, the provider first. So what advice would you give somebody who's doing that like you did and didn't prioritize their home or their partner now that you're on the other side?
Yeah. So this is where legacy really comes into play. I think we misunderstand what legacy is. Often I think we think it's like, will people remember me when I'm gone? I don't care if anyone remembers my name. Legacy is what you leave in people, not what you leave for them. And so if you're pursuing everything for career at the expense of everything else, play that out. Okay, when you're gone, what is your legacy? Well, he ignored his wife, he ignored his kids, and he built a big business. Oof, man, is that how you want to be remembered? I certainly don't.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If you got kids, the clock is ticking. You don't have time to mess around. You have one shot. You will never get a do-over. So as painful as it may be to make a little bit less currently, or maybe not get the promotion you wanted or start the business you wanted or whatever, if you can delay that till the next season of life when the kids are no longer there and you've raised them exceptionally well with where they have deep connection with you, and your legacy is he fostered a strong family that created more strong families, it's probably going to be more worth it in the long run. So that's the first kind of gut check is, what legacy are you really building right now? Is it only money? Is it only fame or career or status? If so, it's never going to fill that hole for you. It's never going to be fulfilling, because it's going to fall short one day and everyone else will be gone because you shun them and push them away. And you're going to be like those guys you see who are old and full of regret. And so I want to help men be full of
not have that regret.
Memories and pride and strength in their old age, whatever else they did in career. And real quick too, I think there's like 3 types of legacy. So there's our family, which should be first. The one you do with your deepest relationships is the most important.
Start there.
Your career is like number 2, right? Once you've got that in order, you're going to inherently build a better business anyway. You're going to be a better example to people who need to follow you, all of that kind of stuff, right? And I'm not saying starting a business or being successful is a bad thing. It's a good thing. We should desire to be successful and make a positive impact in the world, but it can never be at the expense of our family. And then the final one is, once you have means and resources and a strong family life, look how much good you can then pay forward into the world, way beyond your business, and you can make a bigger impact. So I think those are like categories of legacy, but you have to have them in order, and you have to be building the right one first to be able to get to the next one. And part of that comes through your personal growth.
Dude, that's so important. I never looked at it that way. But I do now, like in family. If I had to go back 10 years, I would have prioritized like really investing in my relationship with my wife and knowing that let's get this right and the business part will take care of itself. But we went business first, and then let's figure out how we mix the business and the relationship together.
Our whole upbringing in society runs on that model. You've been programmed. Like, make no mistake, I say this all the time, everything is mind control. It's either positive or it's negative. You are living a programming, and it's either the one that they gave you or the one that you're deciding for yourself. And so that's why listening to like this podcast, reading books, challenging yourself with other like-minded men who are trying to grow and be better, it positively mind controls you away from all that temptation anyway. Like my struggles and the temptations I used to have zero power over me, not because George is some exceptional human immune to temptation. It's because I've surrounded myself now with all this positive mind control and brothers who care about me and won't let me step out of line, Yeah. And that it's a real shift. You start to look at all of life a lot differently when you get to that point.
You're so right. Just even having one person that's curious about how you're doing in the week will put you in a moment where you make a better decision. Like I've got so many coaching clients that we have a weekly coaching call, and on that call we talk about like, hey, did you make it through the week without alcohol? How did you do the social event? And there'll be guys on there like, man, I was pissed Wednesday. I wanted to have the drink, but I knew I was getting on this call Friday, and I didn't want to tell you guys that I broke. And it was like just that little bit, that 1 30-minute call that he knew was coming in 2 days. He had enough momentum, or they usually have enough momentum, then they say, I don't want to go back. Like, I don't want to stop the momentum. And you guys have to realize, like, whether it's your finances or your relationship or your health, like, you need somebody to help give you momentum. You need somebody to give you a playbook that you believe in, because when you believe in the playbook, then the action shows up. The execution is there. The conviction is there. When you doubt, your efforts are going to be rewarded, or you're unclear what the reward will be, we waver. We're not committed enough to the journey or the mission, right? And so it's like getting a clear understanding of what great looks like. Like, you can give them an example of like, we were pretty bad, right? Like, this is kind of the worst thing you can do in a marriage, but look where we are now. right? And that didn't happen overnight, but there was a shitstorm of problems and trials and tribulations and tears and pain and counseling and all of these things, right? But we stayed the course. We kept getting better. We kept stacking skills and qualities. And that's like, I love that.
I mean, and if I could have had current George coaching previous George, 6-7 years ago,
never had it.
It wouldn't have been a years long process. It would have been much more rapid.
So much.
Yeah. So
I couldn't agree. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I wish on my own journey I had somebody that it wasn't until like year 2.5, 3, where I was like, I need a coach. Like I'm working in a paper bag. But I wish I had somebody that took an interest in my life and said, hey man, I got you.
Yep.
Right? Like, let's go this way.
And so the point you made too, but just like knowing that call is there, guys, like this is how habits are formed, right? Initially, that's the only motivator that's going to work for us, right? We need that pressure. It doesn't stay that way. You get to a point where you have self-discipline now. You can trust yourself more because you've grown more, right? And so initially, that like monkey on your back kind of, ooh, it's coming. That is a good type of pressure. Like, and that is what gets us out of our cycles. And then you create a new one, and you don't need that, antagonizer behind you as much as you did in the past. And then Brotherhood starts to transform where it's all positively focused and less about like, oh, you're doing the wrong things, Initially, we need that kick in the pants, but it transforms and continues to grow as you do. And it's just, I get to see it play out all the time, with the guys in the program and everything. And it's like, it's such a gift to me to see other men interacting in this way, honestly, helping each other out. Cause they have conversations throughout the week through our, platform and whatnot. It's not just George talking to guys. And it's just incredible to see, guys. And so if you don't have that in your life, maybe I'm not the right guy for you. You need to find something. Please connect with other men and start finding some common ground to have some real conversations, courageously transparent, and just watch how much different your life starts to get.
Tell me, where can they find you, George? Yeah,
so it's theelitesentinel.com. It's on Instagram as well as elite_sentinel. And then it's just george.hayworth on Instagram. And that's pretty much the best places to get in touch for now.
Great.
Ramping up pretty heavily on all our marketing and socials and stuff, and lots coming very soon. I don't know when this episode will air, but pretty big, exciting things coming over the summer.
Oh, that's so good. Well, guys, if you have related to any part of George's story, right, you've got to understand that you saw this episode for a reason. You heard his story for a reason. Now it's leading the horse to water. It's time for you to take action. Reach out to George, DM him. He's super open, he's accessible, and I'm sure he has. Do you have like a strategy call like an introductory strategy call that you jump on with guys where you can kind of just find out, hey, where are you, where are you trying to go, and let's see if it's a good fit?
Yeah, so we can book a call. We'll have a little bit of just a quick session to see where you are, what you're most needing, and make sure it's a good fit for both of us, right? I don't want to waste your time. I want to help you win. If I'm not the right guy, I'll connect you to the right guy, right? Maybe you don't need what I'm offering, but I just want men to win because it's so much like I think we're at a point where I don't think we can survive another generation of the status quo. If we don't win this current generation, if we don't step up and shift it, I don't know how we bring this country back. Like I think we're on the precipice. So
we need the numbers in our favor. We need more guys like you out there evangelizing character, qualities, discipline. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I relate with everything you say. And I know how grateful you are that you're on the other end of this, and that gratitude puts itself in the form of your podcast and your business and just putting yourself out there every single day to tell this story, because it is a very tough story to tell. And I appreciate you doing that and sharing that with me and anyone else who watches this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for allowing me to share my story.
You got it. All right, guys. So I'm going to put some links in the video so you guys know how to find George, both on his social and also his podcast. And if you have any thoughts or comments, just leave them below, and give this guy a follow if you're not following him already. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.